Salutations! I'm Patchika and you can call me Patch, and today I'm going to talk a bit about Kingdom Hearts. This wasn't the topic I originally had planned for this week's video, but with Sora being revealed for Smash, I ended up on a bit of a hyperfocus on Kingdom Hearts again, talking about it with my friends and even digging up old characters I'd made back in middle school, along with getting inspired to redraw some old fan art. I figured it would be best to go with the flow and let myself talk about this while it's relevant, rather than making myself make something unrelated and talk about that when I'm not really in the mood for it. I don't know if I'd really consider myself one of the biggest Kingdom Hearts fans out there, as I haven't really been able to keep up super well with the games over the years, but it certainly is a series that I easily fell in love with that means a lot to me because of the role it played in my youth and the time I was really into it. I started out with Kingdom Hearts 2 specifically, and funnily enough, it wasn't even a game that I had picked out. My grandpa had just sent my mom and I his PS2 that he wasn't using anymore in order for us to have the chance to play it, and one day while my mom and I were out and about, she bought a few games for it. One of which was Kingdom Hearts 2, which as I recall she ended up buying because of seeing the Disney characters on the cover. The rest of that story is pretty simple, just that I was bored one day and looking for something to play, and Kingdom Hearts ended up catching my eye the most, and so I sat down to give it a try, and I ended up loving it. At the time, I don't think I had ever played any kind of action RPG, so it was an entirely new experience for me and felt like my ideal game at that point. And while I was fascinated by interacting with Disney characters and worlds as some little silly anime boy, it was the characters original to the game that intrigued me the most. I even thought the Final Fantasy characters were pretty cool, and at the time I really didn't know anything about Final Fantasy other than the fact that Final Fantasy VII existed, and I had seen people talk about Cloud before, I think. So that game sort of introduced me to more things from that series as well, though I wouldn't really end up enjoying Final Fantasy until I finally got to try 14, but that's a story for another time. While Kingdom Hearts 2 was the game that I started out with, it isn't the one that I think about the most when I think of my experience with the series. I've always joked that I'm very much a Nintendo kid, as those are the consoles I grew up with. And they're the ones that I still ended up sticking to the most over the years. I generally have always preferred handheld systems, and as a result of that, the Kingdom Hearts game I ended up playing the most was 358 over 2 days. For anyone else who was around at the time of that game's release as well, Flipnote Hatena was also popular, and while I don't remember a whole lot about it, I do know there was a notable group of people who made Organization 13 OCs and made multiple flipnotes about them. I wasn't anyone too notable myself, but I still made little flip notes of my own characters as well, mainly focusing on Kingdom Hearts and Pokemon things for the most part. Regardless, I've really loved Days, and I enjoyed the story quite a bit. Xion is still one of my favorite characters to this day, and I enjoyed the concept of Organization 13 and being able to see more of how they worked and learn more about each of the characters in the organization. One of the fun things with coming up with an OC as well, from what I remember, was trying to think of a unique element and weapon to assign to the characters that were made. I have 2 Organization 13 OCs that I specifically revived. They had different cringy names that I had given them originally, but since I decided to bring them back, I gave them new names that make more sense and actually fit their themes. I'll get on a little side ramble here to talk about those OCs a bit, I guess. Straxa is the first of the 2. Her true name is Astra. I made her element stars and have decided her weapon was going to be throwing stars, because I think that's amusing and it fits alright with her theme. The second one has been renamed to Ixara, her true name Aria. Her element is sound and her weapon is a whip, but it takes the form of an aux cord that's connected to the headphones she always wears. I don't really have any old art of them just sitting around, especially since most of my drawing of them was just on Flipnote Hatena and probably random paper I could get my hands on in middle school, but they didn't have particularly complicated designs from what I do remember. I've enjoyed bringing them back and drawing them again though. Another OC I have that's related to Kingdom Hearts but isn't an Organization 13 character is one of my oldest OCs I've had. I originally made her when I did play Kingdom Hearts 2, and over time have tweaked her backstory here and there. The name I came up with for her back in middle school is still the same one I use for her today, Relion. I couldn't tell you how I came up with the name. Honestly, it was just one of those things that I felt fit the vibe of the setting and sounded cool. And I thankfully do have at least one old drawing of her from elementary school that I can share maybe and compare to other drawings that I've also done of her. Relion's backstory is probably kind of vague, but with how old of a character she is, and in a series like Kingdom Hearts, I don't think anyone is going to blame me for that. I made it so she started out on Destiny Island with the other kids and ended up lost in the darkness when it arrived. She was essentially trapped in a dream state for some time until her heart was able to reach out to the Dream Eaters who were able to help her out of the darkness. After that, she ends up wielding a Keyblade of her own and working closely with the Dream Eaters as someone who can tame them and has them as companions to help her through her own adventures. From her backstory alone, you can probably catch that I've also really enjoyed Dream Drop Distance. I just think the concept of the gameplay and everything is really neat, and I love the designs of the various Dream Eaters. Also, from having a little handful of characters from the few games that I have played in the series, I feel like that really shows how much of an influence it had on me at the time and my creativity. I certainly wasn't at the level I am at now, but having these characters to become so invested in and enjoy drawing definitely helped me in the long run of my journey with art and character creation. Even if it's not a series I talk about as much as Fire Emblem or Zelda, it's definitely one that had an impact on me and that I'm grateful I was able to experience. It's things like that that I love about creative mediums so much, because it's possible to have a pretty big impact on somebody even if they don't experience a whole lot of whatever you've created. I think that will be the end of my Kingdom Hearts ramble for now. I hope it was at least somewhat enjoyable if you chose to stay and listen through the whole thing, and if you did make it to the end of this video, thank you so much. It means a lot to me that people enjoy what I'm creating. Also, before I go, I'll ask a question this time. Have you ever played Kingdom Hearts before? If so, which game is your favorite? And who's your favorite character? I'd love to know. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and please feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy it so you can keep up with future videos. Farewell for now, and I'll see you somewhere on the internet.